When George W. Bush and Tony Blair invaded Afghanistan in search of Osama bin Laden, they set in motion 2 decades of violence predicated on falsehoods and misdirection that resulted in countless deaths and unpunished dishonesty. Unlike many other anniversaries, no one in their right mind will be celebrating the fact that the U.S. unlawfully invaded Afghanistan with the full consent of the British government 20 years ago today, ushering in 2 decades of misery that have yielded nothing. The vicious, heavily armed, beturbanned bumpkins who now rule the desperate country are in the process of orchestrating the exodus of the country's entire educated middle class by handing out thousands of exit visas and passports to anyone who can get past the bureaucracy and armed guards at the passport office. As we speak, the exact people who have the best chance of making a difference or holding the Taliban accountable are fleeing for their lives. You have to wonder if the men who are mostly to blame for this dreadful downpour ever consider the harm they have caused the Afghan people. I'm not talking about Al-Qaeda, ISIS, or even the Taliban. Tony Blair and George W. Bush are the people I'm referring to. In the weeks following the tragedies of 9/11, the couple were so intent on pursuing the political imperative of identifying and defeating the enemy that capturing Osama bin Laden from his Afghanistan lair became the only aim that mattered. The Afghan people are not our enemy, for they have our sympathy and they will have our support, Blair said in the House of Commons at the time. We act for justice. We act with world opinion behind us, and we have an absolute determination to see justice done and this evil of mass international terrorism confronted and defeated. How hollow those words sound now, 20 years later, when the conflict that followed claimed the lives of 174,000 people. And how ludicrous. Because the terror and instability that have engulfed Afghanistan since the United States and its allies retreated has been left as a legacy by Blair and Bush. The American taxpayer is paying for the abandoned military vehicles being driven around Kabul by ruthless Taliban thugs as they hunt down Afghans who assisted the allies. Of course, the scars left by the 2 former leaders are not limited to Afghanistan. It was merely the starting point for the fight against Al-Qaeda, and the focus quickly shifted to Iraq, where Blair and Bush decided in 2003, based on fabricated evidence, that the terrorist organization was based there and plotting against the West. The pair's manipulation of intelligence to justify going to war was so egregious at the time that the Kuala Lumpur War Crimes Commission unanimously convicted them guilty of crimes against peace, against humanity, and genocide in 2016. More than 1 million Iraqis died in that ill-conceived war as a direct result of Blair and Bush's deception. However, when their tenure in office came to a close, both men simply walked away from power, bodies piling up behind them and no meaningful consequences. They went on to create personal fortunes, not that Bush wasn't already well off, while Blair continues to lecture the world on democracy and hold court via his Global Institute to pontificate on the world's issues. There will be no remorse. There is no accountability. Nothing. However, when we commemorate the date on which they began their years of bombing and murdering people all around the world, there may be an opportunity to offer some reparation. It would be right if Tony Blair and George W. Bush were prosecuted for starting those wars. It would put an end to 2 decades of agony for millions of innocent civilians while also demonstrating that important lessons had been learned. Unfortunately, we all know this will never happen, but it's fun to fantasize. Ask the Afghans who were left behind after the most recent humiliating retreat. They only have their dreams.